I love these woods. And I used to come down here all the time when I was a kid. A whole bunch of my friends. Whew. We played cops and robbers down here all the time. We just chase each other around, hunt each other, and just go exploring. So I know this place like the back of my hand. Now, have you ever been in a place like this? Just everything's going great, everything's right, and everything's familiar. Like you know everything that's going to happen, everything's pretty predictable, and everything's really comfortable. But then suddenly, something changes. And you don't exactly know what it is, but suddenly everyone just seems to be on your case. Your parents are on your case. You know, people at your job won't leave you alone. People at your school won't leave you alone. And you don't know what it is, but suddenly everything is uncomfortable. Everything is not okay. Everything is unfamiliar. There was this guy that we all know in the Bible. His name is Moses. And his story starts pretty early on in the book of Exodus. And what you have is, baby Moses, he was born to this Hebrew woman named Yocheved. And Yocheved had a very difficult decision to make when Pharaoh decided that he needed all the baby boys in Egypt to be killed because he was afraid that there would be some kind of uprising and the Hebrews would annihilate the Egyptian people. So she takes her baby, and in this wild act of faith or trust or desperation, she puts this baby into a woven basket and sets him into the biggest river in the world. Now, as fate would have it, or rather as God would have it, as we know, Moses finds his way into Pharaoh's own colonnade, right in the middle of his palace. This is where the river takes him, and he's found by one of Pharaoh's handmaidens. Now, the Egyptians are incredibly superstitious people, so they really believe that the gods have brought this baby to them for some amazing purpose or some amazing blessing. So Moses is raised as one of the Egyptian people. Not just that, but as an Egyptian noble. So here is this Hebrew Moses growing up as an Egyptian noble, as an Egyptian privileged. So with all of this privilege and all this education, Moses was incredibly comfortable for the next 40 years of his life. Now obviously Moses wasn't dumb, and the people of Egypt weren't dumb. He didn't have Egyptian physical characteristics or facial features. He didn't look Egyptian. He looked very Hebrew. So he knew where he came from, even if the gods had blessed him to be there. So one day when he was around 40 years old, he saw this Egyptian man beating a Hebrew slave into his work. And something just rises up in Moses that he gets very angry. And in this heated moment of anger or desperation or confusion or adrenaline, he kills this Egyptian man. Now, even as privileged as Moses is, he knows that what he did is going to get him legally killed by the law system in Egypt. So he runs away. He flees entirely the land of Egypt into the wilderness, into the unknown. And so for the next 40 years of his life, he's living in this unknown wilderness, uncomfortable, uncool, unknown to him. He's in the wild. And so we know the next part of the story, that sometime during this, after another 40 years, Moses runs into this amazing encounter with the Almighty God. And God gives him this incredible mission to free the Hebrew people, but Moses is still a little bit unsure about all of this, and he asks, "Who should I say has sent me?" And God's answer is simple and profound as anything we have ever read. God simply says, "I am." Now when we read this in the English, we get a little bit confused by the writing in it, because when we read it, it says, "I am," period. But the English syntax, the English writing, doesn't do this idea too much justice, because when we read it in Hebrew, it's more appropriate to be written as "I am ... or "I am ... underline." The real idea here is God is saying, "I am ... fill in the blank. I am exactly what you need to be in this blank space right here." You see, when God reveals himself, he doesn't say, "Here I am." when God reveals himself, he says, you need to trust me right now. And completely unbeknownst to the Hebrew people, when they hear about this I am, they know who he is, but they've got a lot of learning to do about what that I am really means, because they're about to spend the next entire generation of their lives out into the unknown, into the unpredictable, into the uncomfortable. And they need to trust that God will do exactly what he says he's going to do. See, we struggle all the time with this concept about what faith actually is. And we say, yes, I have faith. I believe in God. I believe there is a God. Well, I believe there was a Buddha. I believe that guy existed. Now, I don't believe that he was a God, but he was a man and that he did exist. That doesn't help me. Because I would still have to trust some man to be what he claimed to be. That's not what actual biblical faith was. Because the Hebrews, they had some amazing privilege on their own for that 40 years. Because every night of that 40 years, they were led around the wilderness by a pillar of fire. And every day they were led around by the whirlwind. Every day they saw dry bread rain from the skies to feed them every day. And when they were to meet with God on Mount Sinai, they saw his presence in such an obtuse way to the rest of nature that tension with God's nature and nature itself caused the sky to go black and a violent thunderstorm occurred. They didn't have to wonder if God existed. They knew that God existed, but that wouldn't help them. God knew that. What God knew is that they needed to trust him not only that he would be what they needed to be, but that God would do exactly what he said he was going to do. That is the core of what faith is. It's not believing that God's there. It's a matter of, do we trust God? Do we rely on God? Do we depend on God? And so that's the tension that we live in times that things are unfamiliar, or that things are uncomfortable, or that we just don't know what we're supposed to do. Our believing that there is a God is helpful, but what is meant to carry us through those times is believing that God will be the answer to our questions. He will be the completion of our problems, that he will fill in that blank for us, even if we don't quite know what that means. God promises that he'll be that, and we're to trust him on that. That's the definition of faith. It's trusting in that unseen conclusion. It's believing in that hope that we don't quite see yet, but that God can see yet. So may we really learn how to trust in God, really learn what that faith is, really learn to depend on him in those times that nothing's dependable. Because God has never changed, he never will, and he will always be there with the answer that we needed the whole time.